Welcome to the Huntley Leadership Podcast, helping leaders be a positive catalyst in the people they support, the organizations they serve, and the communities they live. This podcast will make you think, laugh, and grit your teeth with new determination to make your parish or business a place of transformation, passion, and purpose. If you're still breathing, you are powered for impact. Hello and welcome back to the Huntley Leadership Podcast. If this is your first time, a special welcome to you. And for all those of you that are returning, welcome home. It's good to have you back. We love to discuss things, matters of leadership that are primarily in the church, things that can make us more effective and better. It's a real treat to have Bishop Louis Tylka on our podcast as a guest today. He's a good friend and someone who's a bishop in Peoria, Illinois. Welcome to the show, Bishop Lou.
Ron, it's great to be with you. Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, you're most welcome. I'm going to invite you to stick around to the end. We're going to be talking about a topic that's in some sense difficult to talk about, but also incredibly necessary. And I think the freer we are able to talk about it, the better the outcomes. And that is sometimes having to right-size our diocese, taking a look at the resources we have and the human resources we have and aligning those for mission. And that can be hard, whether you're a layperson in a church where things are shifting, whether you're a pastor that has to lead that change, or whether you're a bishop and his team having to make very difficult conversations. Our hope is that as we have this conversation together, that will spark some very honest and open dialogue in your diocese if those are things that you need to have. So stick around. I think you're going to have fun, and I'm going to make a special announcement at the end that I think you'll want to stick around for. So great to have you join us today. So Bishop Lou, when you came on in your role as bishop, was right-sizing your diocese something that you were already prioritizing?
When I was named bishop in 2020, I had this funny title. I was called a coadjutor bishop. And what that means is that when my predecessor retired, I was going to automatically succeed him as the bishop in the Diocese of Peoria. Right. I was a priest in Chicago for 24 years before becoming a bishop. And had experienced in Chicago their Renew My Church process that was going on, which was right-sizing the structure, the network of parishes in the Archdiocese of Chicago. So I had a little bit of experience of those conversations and that were leading into it. But when I came to the Diocese of Peoria, which I had never been to, other than driving through it prior to my being named as the bishop here, I didn't know what I was going to need to do. Yeah. So, the idea of knowing that many dioceses need to confront the reality of fewer resources, fewer people going to Mass, fewer priests, less financial support, and that I anticipated that is likely going to be impacting my diocese, but not really knowing it, I needed to get to know it. And one of the blessings when you're a coadjutor bishop is that you have no authority and no responsibility. So,
associate priest or something.
Exactly. You spend your time with everybody waiting for you to do something, and you keep having to apologize that you can't do anything because you're not the bishop. You're just the bishop in waiting. I use that time as a coadjutor bishop to get to know the diocese. And I went around to certainly just get a survey of the land, but really to meet the people and to listen to what they saw as both challenges and opportunities. I began with meetings with my priests, and it was very clear from the very first meeting I had with our priests. They were saying, we have too many churches. We don't have enough priests. So the priests were saying that they needed to do something. We needed to do something as a diocese. To make a long story short, is my second year, I went back around my diocese. We had have 12 vicariates in the diocese. And my second go around, I was meeting with lay leaders from the parishes. Basically, I asked them 4 questions. What do you see as our biggest opportunity as a church? What do you see as our biggest challenge as a church? What are the 3 priorities you're working on in your parishes? And what advice do you give the new guy? What do you want to tell the new bishop?
I hope people who are listening write down those questions. Those are really clever questions.
So we basically listened again, and the lay people were
Mm,
telling me that they cared about their priests and they were concerned that their priests were being overworked because most of my priests were running from parish to parish.
yeah.
They realized that they were in some cases living in parishes that no longer were viable communities of faith to
Mm,
continue on. That many cases, part of my diocese is rural, and so
mm,
in rural America, there's been an exodus from small towns and that. So
yeah.
there was just a realization again from the lay folks that something needed to happen, and we needed to take an honest assessment of ourselves, and then
Mm,
see how we could be a more vibrant and mission driven church for the future. So I did not come in with the agenda of restructuring, right sizing the diocese, but I learned very quickly in my first basically year and a half how much that was a need for us to tackle. And so by the time that my predecessor did retire and I did succeed him, basically at that point we were ready to say, this is what you said we need to do, folks. Let's do it.
right.
Let's get to work on it.
Yeah. And sometimes that can be a really difficult thing to do. Like I can only imagine your predecessor, because you get to the end of a long career as a bishop, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not easy to be a clergy in general, and it's not easy to be a bishop,
Right.
and a lot of those decisions are probably very challenging and hard, and take a lot of energy. And so,
Sure.
in many ways, I don't blame him for finishing his term and doing the best he could. But at the end, that's not always when you have the most energy.
Right.
And so, yeah,
And I look back because, in all honesty, the Diocese of Peoria over the years have had several times where they have kind of looked at the issue. But,
sure.
it breeds a lot of fear. Are
Yeah.
we making the right choices? Is this the right thing to do? Is it the right time? So
Mm,
there was a little hesitation and anxiety about whether or not, here we go again, we're going to look at doing some process, and then are we going to end up with some
yeah.
binders that tell us some things that we should do that just aren't going to go on a shelf?
Yeah.
And I made it very clear when I announced that we were going to tackle this issue with the priest. I said, "This is what you told me we need to do, and that's been confirmed by lay people who are leaders in our parishes. Um, and if we're going to do it, we are going to do it. It's not just, we're not making a commitment to spend the next couple of years discerning a direction for it to go nowhere.
Mm,
That I promised them that as long as they would participate and offer the leadership necessary, that I would see it through, that we would make the decisions and we would actually begin to implement those decisions
mm.
once the process got us to that point."
Yeah. That's that's bold, and I'm sorry to our listeners when you hear that clicking in and out. I think it's my sound, my microphone. I haven't figured it out yet. So God bless you. Thanks for sticking with us through that. I wish I could figure that out. Nonetheless, tongue in cheek, I just want to
Mm-hmm.
say a few things and talk to you about it. But it's like, oh, okay. Um, that sounds like a great idea. And thankfully, lay people won't complain. And so it'll make it really easy. It's like, yeah, there you go. We all are laughing right now. It's like,
Exactly.
no. So how do you, like, if you did it really well, you would get no complaints at all. Is that what you think? Like, how do you process that?
Well, I think the reality of needing to do it, and really putting together a process for people to participate will have the impact where people will complain
Right.
because they're passionate about their parish, their
Yep.
church.
Hmm.
Um, so you have to anticipate that there's going to be people who don't want to do what needs to be done.
Yes.
But at the same time, if they're given an opportunity to be a part of the process, if they're given an opportunity to, in a sense, make their case,
Yeah.
Then I think what I found in going through the process was that really, in some ways, tamped down the complaints from those who were engaged and involved.
Yeah.
Uh, I would say that throughout the process that we designed and we went through, I read every single letter that came to my office, and over the course of the years, 2-year process that we did, I received well over 300, 400 letters from
Wow.
people, and sadly, I would say that the majority of those letters came from people who were not connected into the process. They just
Gotcha.
heard something about their church might close, and so they started to, and in many cases, they kind of articulated reasons of why you might consider closing their parish.
Oh, go away.
But you could discern. I could discern as I read those letters, there were those who were actively engaged, and you
Hmm.
had a sense of that by the way the tone of their letter and the way they wrote it.
Yes.
And you were able to see the vast majority of those letters were just people who, could not conceive of anything else but, you could do whatever you want, Bishop, just don't touch my church. Don't do anything with us. We're fine the way we are,
Mm,
and the reality is none of us are fine the way we are.
right.
All of us have room to grow. All of us have challenges we have to face. And all of us have to take up the mission anew. So
Mm.
anybody who is writing an angry letter just to say we're perfectly content the way we are, it was raising their hand and saying, I don't get it.
Good point. Good point. And that's just it. Like, because we can look at the numbers, we can look at the data, we can look at the trajectory, and and you know, a lot of times you don't even need the data because you're just very aware
Mm-hmm.
that if you're engaged, you see the shape of buildings, you see the shape of churches, and you see these poor priests that are managing multiple parishes running
Right.
around. It's hard enough to manage one and be successful.
Correct.
Like to have a booming church that's very fruitful, alive, and making disciples and reaching the lost, that's really, really hard.
Right.
Multiply that by 2, 3, 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I would suggest it's impossible unless you've gotten really good at doing it in the first place. So it's tricky, and it shows the balance that as a bishop and your team have to consider is the
Right.
reality,
Right.
the need, and then filtering that through a process
Mm-hmm.
that's earnest, that does really engage people to try to bring about real solutions that are life-giving
Sure.
and reasonable, so that together we can get back on track. And back on track isn't good enough. It's mission,
Mm-hmm.
isn't it? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not about me and whether I feel like it's good enough. It's
Sure.
about what Christ has called us to do and whether or not we're going to obey and make a darn difference in the world.
Right. Maybe to talk a little bit about the process,
Please.
and also to kind of put it into a very, I think, particular context.
Please.
When we were, so first off, when I became the bishop and we were looking at doing this, I knew that I and my staff did not have the capacity to lead this on our own.
Mm.
We knew we needed help.
Yeah.
And so I was very grateful to reach out to Catholic Leadership Institute, CLI, and discuss with them what we were looking to do.
Yes.
They didn't come in and say, this is how you do it, or the way you have to do it. They came in and said, okay, Bishop, what is your goal? And then how do we want to achieve that goal? And I said, my goal is to build a mission-driven, sustainable, vibrant church.
Mm.
This is what we want to do. To the extent that what we named our process was growing disciples.
Mm-hmm.
What we're looking to do is grow disciples for the Lord. It's my Episcopal motto. And the reality is that we're doing this in a context that is necessitating some difficult conversations and difficult
Yes.
change, but the idea behind it all is hope-filled, that we will be renewed, as a local church with the mission that Jesus has given to us, and so we want to grow disciples. And in order to do that, we have to be honest enough to look at ourselves to say, the way we're doing it now is not succeeding in the mission that we have as a church. And we have to do things differently. So, I think putting it in the whole process into the context of not just closing churches or merging parishes, is really important, because if that's the way somebody sees the process, it's managing decline, and we're not here to manage decline. We're here to invite growth. And so it was very important from the start, my role as bishop, to keep articulating that this is the reality. We're looking at ourselves so that we can become a much more mission-driven, vibrant, sustainable church of the future.
Yes.
And we're growing disciples. This is the purpose of it. And then to just hammer that time and time again. I think the other thing was, with the process that we designed with CLI, in all honesty, we looked at the information we had.
Yes.
And it was horrible.
Okay.
We did not have accurate data of our diocese. We did not have a good sense of who we are and what was going on. And so we had to start almost from scratch to say, okay, let's send out a survey to our parishes. Let them tell us what the reality is in the parishes, and collect all of that in.
Yes.
But hard data is only part of the picture.
Yeah.
You can look at numbers and statistics. We can look at the finances, and that only tells part of the picture. You have to look at the soft data, which is the story of the parishes and what's going on. And why is this community that used to be so vibrant now not so vibrant? What are the stories behind the fact that this community, again, in a diocese that's largely rural, why has there been such a dramatic shift in population in this particular area? What's the history of the parish itself? And so to take all of that in and to put those pieces together, and then to be able to say, we went through rounds of what we called modeling. Our first question is, are we talking about the right places together? Should parishes A, B, and C be the ones that we're talking about, or should parishes A and B be a group that we're talking about, and C and D and E are a different group? Our first question, and again, involving people in the process, we kept pushing it out. So here's our proposal. Are these the right places? We got the feedback. We had the data. We took in some of the soft data, and then we were able to say, from our perspective, just as an example, you could say these two parishes should most likely be the ones that you're talking about, but the soft data says, oh no, these two parishes are oil and water, so you don't want to talk to them, put them together.
Something common, yeah.
So but we put that out, let people give feedback. We made alterations to our modeling. Then our next round was to put out and say, okay, now we've got the right groups of parishes talking together. What's the proposal for what would look like in that configuration of parishes?
Okay.
Does it mean, and one of my contentions, as you talked about priest resources, most of my pastors were pastoring multiple parishes. And I said, wouldn't it be easier if, instead of pastoring multiple parishes, you pastored one parish with multiple sites? So instead of having 3 finance councils and 3 parish councils and 3 staffs and 3 bulletins and 3 of everything, if we could bring you together into a single parish where you have one group that is your pastoral counter, you have one financial council, can we make your life a little bit easier by bringing folks together and asking them to work together as a single entity, as a single parish? So we put that out there again. Let people chew on it. Let them pray about it. And then offer their feedback to us. And so we took that second round of modeling, and we heard again from the people. what was going on, and were we moving in the right direction? You know, again, all the time being very deliberate in reminding folks that the process is about growing disciples, about growing a mission-driven, vibrant church for the future. Our third round of modeling was what was ultimately going to be recommended to me as the bishop, to make decisions. I was very involved in the first two rounds.
Okay.
But once they got through the first two rounds, I let my team take over, and I stepped out of the process so that I would have freedom and they would have freedom to review what the plan was being developed.
Okay.
And there were changes, and so then it was ultimately, and again, one of the great things with CLI is they were very adaptive to, as we went through the process, and we learned things during the process that made us change.
Yeah.
So we ended up deciding to release those third round models that we had not originally had intended to do. And that was, again, very helpful for people to say, oh, wait, in a couple of cases, they all of a sudden they raise their hand, because in the second round, everything looked good, but now in the third round, it's looking different.
Yes.
And so, again, offering the opportunity for people to share their thoughts and their opinions, and then to ultimately bring that back to what the was presented to the Presbyteral Council as the recommendation, which they then wrestled with and offered their advice to me, for me to ultimately make the decision. So the process is really important, involving people in being clear about what the purpose is, and I don't think any diocese or any bishop who goes through this is going to say, I'm here because I just want to close parishes.
Never.
Speaking very honestly, as a person, when I got some of those letters,
Yeah.
that were calling me names,
Yeah.
I would think, at times I would stop and I think, do you think I woke up this morning with the idea that I want to close your parish?
Yeah.
That's the farthest thing from my mind,
Yeah. Yeah. I
and
know how
yet,
hard it is. I know how hurtful
yeah,
it is. I know
yeah,
how attached you are. Like, I know that.
yeah,
And yet we still have to make like we have opposing
correct.
values, and leadership in those times.
Mhm.
It requires difficult decisions where there's no easy answers.
Right. But I would say, Ron, it's not necessarily even opposing values, because I think that value is the same. The value is to be a disciple of Jesus and to make disciples for Jesus.
Yeah, maybe they're competing
But
versus
they're
opposing.
competing, right?
Yes,
That's a better
yes,
word,
that's a better
because
word. Yes,
the competition is the reality that we have and lack resources.
yes,
But we also lack the ability, because of the drain of resources, to commit ourselves fully to the
yeah,
mission that is the value that we are upholding.
yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's really important for people to hear that, because it's, it's kind of like politics. I'm in
Mhm.
Canada, you're in the US, and, it's so easy to judge politicians and say how dumb they are. And,
Yep.
man, it's easy to throw stones when we're not in those really challenging conversations with all the multiple factors that come into making decisions. And it's so easy to be a critic. And yet, when you find yourself in leadership, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with leadership. And it's hard to communicate every single thing that goes into making these decisions. So there
Correct.
needs to be a degree of trust and goodwill. And it's hard, but
Yep.
it's so important. I want to share this with you just for your thought, just for your feedback. But I'm aware that I read a book recently. I was at a conference in the UK. Last year, and my mom was there too, and she bought me a book from the speaker. He's a great speaker. Really enjoyed him. He was an evangelical pastor. In 14 years, he's grown his church to 30,000 and is in 16 buildings. And I'm thinking to myself, what?
Mm-hmm.
like that's great. Our diocese alone in 15 years shrunk by 50% in church attendance. So
Sure.
they're growing at the same rate we're shrinking. And so there's one thing to grow into success, to multiply because you're doing good things and making disciples, and therefore taking that model of success and doing it. But in many ways, it feels like we're shrinking into multiple sites, not growing into multiple sites. And so, doing church in a way that's growing numbers and engaging people and making new disciples isn't something that we've been good at in the last
No.
50 years.
Well, and I agree with you. I think part of that is how often has it been the case, especially in the Catholic Church, that we've talked about? I want to make new Catholics.
Yeah. Right.
We start by saying I want to make new Catholics, which great, but before we're Catholic, we're a disciple. Our conversion is to Jesus Christ. Amen. And his church.
Yes.
But it's to Jesus Christ before it's his church. And so, I think that, again, if we look at who we're really called to be and the mission that we've been given, I'm not naive and I'm not foolish to think that even after going through this 2-year process, and now we're only in the beginning months of our actually implementing what the plan is as far as our structures of our parish. But we keep talking about the fact that now that we're in the implementation phase, what we really have to pick up and work hard on is helping us to continue to understand who we are as disciples of Jesus Christ. So part of it is let's call ourselves disciples, right? What does it mean to be a disciple of Jesus? And we have far too many people sitting in our pews that don't look at themselves as a disciple. Right? They look at themselves as a Christian going to mass, fulfilling my obligation. We got to help them to realize that there's more to who they are called to be than just showing up on Sunday. As important as Sunday is, and as central as the Eucharist is to our life, in many ways, unless we're having that encounter with Jesus that changes and transforms us and sends us out into the world, not on the Lord's part, but on our part, it's an empty experience, right? The Lord is always going to give us fully himself and everything we need. Are we willing to open ourselves up to receive what the Lord is giving to us so that we can go out and share that as a believer and as a disciple? So, we got to get a lot better at using the language that is really the language that's rooted in the scripture. What did Jesus say? Go therefore and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, teaching them all that I have commanded them to observe. Right. So let's take up anew that identity and name as a disciple of Jesus. Let's take up anew the sense of what evangelization is about and who we're called to be as evangelizing disciples. Let us understand we're on mission. We're not, we should not be complacent followers. We need to be people who get set on fire by the Holy Spirit to go out into the world and have conversations with people that invite them to encounter the Lord. I'm amazed. I am truly amazed at the number of people, especially in my last couple of years now serving as bishop, and that, so many people are far better than I am at engaging people in conversations about their faith.
I know. I feel the same way. I meet people all the time. Like,
and
wow,
I talk to many of my priests who say, I was trained to be a priest. I wasn't trained to be a disciple. What does it mean to be a disciple? But it is happening.
Yeah.
People are out there hungering for God. And there are people, again, far better than I, that are living their life on mission. And I feel like one of my biggest responsibility as bishop is to just keep raising up that reality, to keep saying, oh, well, look at what's happening in our Newman centers, or look at what's happening in this parish. Look at what's happening because these people are living out their life as a missionary disciple, and not just showing up to be able to say, I can check the box. I did what the church told me to do by showing up for mass, and I'll see you next Sunday.
Well, it is so unfulfilling, especially when we have so many people in our lives who we care about, who either no longer find Jesus or the church relevant, or maybe who'd never even really given him a try, and us being so ineffective as individuals at engaging
Hmm.
people in a way that helps them understand the awesome nature of having a God who loves them,
Yeah.
who's way bigger than their sin, is their
Right.
biggest cheerleader, and wants them to have a life worth living. It's like it's literally the best news ever.
Right.
And so we have such a message. But one of the things I've realized, Bishop Lou, over the years, is so many of the things that we take for granted as part of our structures, as even part of our mission. When you break them down, there's a lot of skills that are involved in bringing that to life. And I don't know that we fully appreciate the skills required to get those types of results. Like, to me, I heard it said one time that there's two things required in order to bring about change. One is the inspiration or the
Hmm.
motivation, and the other one is the skills. And there was a joke that it just kind of says, and in our Catholic faith, when we want change, we fire up a really good homily and we let them have it. And then if we don't see the change we're looking for, then we fire up another really good homily and we let them have it. But if
Right.
then we don't see change, then we fire up another really good homily and we let them have it,
Right.
because we don't always understand the skills that are required to bring about effective change in the form of becoming experts in parish evangelization, or understanding how to have amazing meetings,
Right.
or making sure our structure is aligned for mission in our parish and how flexible that needs to be, because it needs to be updated every 6 to 12 months. Like, there's a lot of skills around leading well that aren't necessarily a part of the training, might be part of the, we expect and we hope for the results, but I don't know that we always appreciate the level of skills required to be good at it. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you 100%. I don't have all the skills. I don't have all the knowledge.
Mm,
I don't have all the answers.
mm.
What I have is my experience of Jesus Christ in my own life and my ability to respond with who I am, right?
Yes.
I heard a great homily, talking about firing up a homily, but I heard a great homily by a brother bishop recently who said the only qualification you need to be a disciple is your own witness of your experience of Jesus in your life.
Hmm.
And I thought it was profound.
Mm.
You don't need a degree in theology. You don't need to have a bunch of letters after your name saying that you're now a disciple of Jesus Christ. You have to have the experience of having been touched by Jesus Christ.
Amen.
That being said, especially if you want to be in leadership
Yeah.
in the church or anywhere, you
Mm.
do have to develop skills,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You have to be willing to look at yourself and say, I still have a lot to grow. I don't have all the answers. I don't even know all the questions. So how could I have all the answers, right?
True.
So I have to be willing to know that I have to be challenged and
Mm.
that I have a lot of room to grow as a person,
Mm.
as a disciple, and as a leader. I think it's incumbent upon the church these days to foster growth in teaching the skills.
Yeah.
Uh, and we can't assume anybody has them,
No, we can't.
so, um, you know, whether, so often now as a bishop, I'm dealing with my priests, right? They're my
Yeah.
closest collaborators in that.
Yep.
I would argue, and I'm not, and I don't say this in a demeaning way to my presbyterate, but I would argue that more than half of the guys who are priests, who are good holy men,
Hmm.
they would say, I have not been trained to form disciples.
No, it's true.
They question whether they were ever formed to be a disciple. And
Yeah.
so, I talked to, I put together a group for ongoing formation for my priests. And I said, here's our mission. I said, as long as I am your bishop, our mission is single minded discipleship, discipleship, discipleship. I
Yes.
said, if you're thinking about what's the topic we need to bring a speaker in for our priest gathering,
Yeah.
discipleship. If you're thinking about what we need to do, it's discipleship. We're going to hammer this over and over again to ourselves
Yeah.
because, again, we have to learn it and continue to learn it and deepen
Amen.
that experience in ourselves so that we can help others, do the same. We're looking for ways. Part of our process, we had what we called key parish leaders.
Yep.
We had the pastor select a couple people who would be people of influence in their parish that would help us to champion our process. And when they got done doing their service and leading the parish meeting and that, we invited to come to a day of formation. We said, you thought you were done, and I said, your pastor didn't tell you that your bishop was going to ask you to do more after you did your role as a key parish leadership. I said,
Yeah.
you were chosen and elevated by your pastor to take a role in leadership because they already see you as that. I want you as your bishop to deepen your own discipleship so you can go back to your parish and continue to be that key parish leader, but now in the particular role of how do we form disciples? How do we help give people the skills and the awareness that they're called to this evangelizing mission as a disciple of Jesus? I tell my seminarians, and I said, it's not just you as seminarians. I mean, it's the priests as well. It's your bishop as well. We have to keep learning skills on how to lead. And that I said, when you finish the seminary, as good as that experience has been, and it's given you many gifts and talents to you prepare you to be a priest. I said, but you're not done, and you have to, you're now going to go into a parish. You're going to have to learn what it means to lead in a parish. I said, the seminary can't teach you that. The only way you're going to learn that is by, one, having a good mentor, and two, utilizing opportunities to grow as you continue to identify what your gifts and talents are, but also what your shortcomings are so that you can fill in that gap.
Yeah.
And so I'm really stressing with the men that I'm privileged to ordain to say, I want to invest with you. I want to help you to continue to grow as leader. And even not just the young guys,
Right.
we have mentioning CLI, there's a conference coming up in January that CLI is partnering with Evangelical Catholic called Priests for an Apostolic Age.
Yes.
So I reached out to my committee for ongoing formation. I said, who are 5 priests of influence in the diocese that should go to this conference? And they came up with a name, and all the priests that I invited to go to the conference, the 5 guys are all priests who've been around for 15 years at least.
Yes.
And so I reached out to these 5 guys and I said, I want you to go to the conference. And I said, and I'm going to pay for you to go to the conference, and I'm going to go to the conference with you. I said, because we need to learn this skills to become better leaders as priests, as disciples in this apostolic age. And they also know that when they come back, our next clergy day, our next assembly day for our priests, they're part of the program.
Right.
They're going to have to share what they learned. They're going to have to help the rest of the presbyterate kind of deepen that understanding. So it's making a commitment. I guess the last thing on developing skills and making this commitment is that, we can't have the expectation it's going to happen overnight.
Right. You're a good point.
It's going to take time. It's going to take time as we build a culture. It's going to take time as people are, need the space and time to develop the skills. I often find myself saying to folks that I work closely with, I said, we're in it for the long game. The long game is to get us to heaven, and we got a ways to go before we're going to get there. And so we can't expect the change that we're dreaming of to happen in 6 months or in a year. It's going to take a generation or two for us to ingrain our understanding of who we're called to be and the mission we're given, and how do we develop ourselves so that we can fulfill that mission.
Amen. It's interesting. When I first started coaching years ago in 2016, after the Divine Renovation book was launched, phone started ringing, and I'm thinking, oh gosh, this is exciting at first, and then it was overwhelming. I'm like, oh gosh, this is crazy. Let's have a conference. That's a Canadian way of saying, no, I don't have time to talk to you. Nobody's going to come anyway. But lo and behold, it's sold. And we carried on. But what was interesting is, as I was having conversations, a lot of the questions that people were asking were the wrong questions. It'll be like me saying, hey, I think I'm going to be a bishop someday. Where did you get your glasses? It's like, what do you mean? I look, well, you're a bishop and you have nice glasses, and I want to be a bishop someday, so I'd like to get your glasses. It's like, dude, that's the wrong question. And so often, Bishop, Louis, I was being asked the wrong question. I just thought, oh gosh, this is crazy. But every now and again, I could tell that that person got it, and the questions they were asking were the right questions, and they were passionate. I thought those are people I could work with.
Mm-hmm.
And we started working together, and I didn't know what I was doing in many ways. Like, I believed that I could help people. I wanted to help people, but I didn't necessarily know for sure that what I was going to do was going to work. I had no idea. How could I know? I'd never done it before, and nobody else was doing it back then. I think we were the very first ones to do it, and I was the only one doing it. We had one coach, and it was me. And so off we went, and about 6 months into it, I began to ask them. I asked them all this question, like, what are you seeing? What is changing in you that, and are there any changes that you see in your church? Because I didn't know the answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked them the question, and every single person straight across the board, I started with 11 churches originally, every one of them said the exact same thing. They said, hope is rising and everybody feels it. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of hopelessness in churches that are continuing to be stagnant or dying. Like, it's spiritual suffocation, and it's so hard. But within a short period of time, these people were experiencing hope rising that they'd never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's so cool, and I say that because I think you bring that as a bishop to your diocese. It was a pleasure to work with you for a short period of time in Chicago before the Pope made you a bishop and
Right.
messed up our plans of working
That's right.
together. We continued the friendship and conversations, but it was really neat to watch you as a priest and meet you as somebody who was head of your priest's committee, or whatever that was called, like your priest council.
Right.
You really cared and you were invested in your brother priest. You're always good at listening. And you took those exact same listening skills and care for priests, and you brought that to being a co-adjudicator bishop. And then you're applying that in your role as the ordinary. And hope is a powerful thing.
Mm-hmm.
And hope doesn't take generations. That's my point.
Right.
Hope doesn't take generations. Hope doesn't take long at all. When we see authentic people who love us, who are honest and sincere and are willing to go into battle with us and believe the victory is possible,
Mm-hmm.
hope rises. And I've watched that happen with you.
Yeah. It's amazing because, I tongue in cheek say that, the only people who write letters are people who are angry, have an axe to grind, or an agenda to push.
Yeah.
Those are generally the types of letters that I think most bishops get.
Yep.
And certainly in our process, the majority of the letters that I received were letters that were, again, expressing anger, and frustration and disappointment, hopelessness,
Mm-hmm.
and again, the sad reality is in reading those letters and hearing from folks in that way, that they were, the anger was misguided,
Right.
And their sense of despair or their sense of hopelessness was misgiven because they could do something about it, but they chose to kind of not see the opportunity for them to live differently and thereby to impact their church. But when people see leadership, when people are challenged, people actually like to be challenged.
It's true.
I'm amazed now that we've made our announcements and now that we're beginning to implement our plan, which just to be clear, our plan is we had 156 parishes. And when we finish the process, our plan is to have 75 parishes.
Right.
We're going from 159 churches to 129 churches. So we're looking at losing 30 church worshiping sites,
Right.
In this process. But I go to places and I'm just amazed. I've had people come up to me and say, and of course you always brace when they, Bishop, I want to talk to you. It's like, oh, here it
Get
comes,
in your athletic stance.
you know, and I just amazed at the feedback that I get. Thank you for making the hard decision.
Yes.
Um, I don't like it, but I understand, and so I'm going to work to make a difference now. I'm gonna, I couldn't, I couldn't save my church,
Yes.
but I want to make sure there is a church, and so I'm gonna work towards joining the parish together. I'm gonna invite people to join, um, eh, you know, and people saying things like, you know, we have, we see things are moving. We
Yeah.
feel that the Spirit is alive in our church. Um, and uh, I feel a sense of purpose in living my faith now. And that's the stories we have to keep raising up, because
Amen.
that shows that what we're trying to do is this renewal. That invites us to a much more hope-filled future.
Yeah.
With a church that is mission-driven, vibrant,
Yeah.
sustainable, and growing.
Yeah.
And again, we can't be naive. I mean, even going to where we are today, I mean, who knows? None of us have the ability to say in 10 years
Yeah.
we might lose another 10 churches in 10 years.
Right.
It'd be great if we add 10 churches back in 10 years,
Right.
because we've ignited a new fire,
Yeah.
and people are coming in, to join us in our life and of disciples and on mission as disciples. I mean, that'd be great.
Yes.
you know
Yeah.
but we have to make the decisions for the reality we're living today,
Yeah.
which necessitates these difficult conversations,
Mm.
difficult decisions,
Yeah.
but I think hope-filled solutions.
I really appreciate your vision and your courage to go the distance. It's so discouraging to be told we're going to make difficult decisions and enter a process only to back away if the complaints get too high.
Mm-hmm.
To not have the fortitude to see things through to the end, so that we can continue to try to win, to be victorious in the culture of darkness is strong, it's
Mm-hmm.
heavy, but we can lift back that culture of darkness
Yeah.
with the right disposition towards Christ and receiving him and his Holy Spirit, and working in collaboration and unity with our pastors and bishops. And so it's really exciting when bishops have visions, when pastors have visions, and when we are willing to make the sacrifices to bring those to pass. And
Mm-hmm.
so, when I look at what you've done and how you've done it, you've been very intentional. It's not willy-nilly, but there's a high level of commitment, a high level of intentionality, and a humility to get the help required. And I just applaud what you're doing. I'm really glad we could have this conversation.
So am I. Happy to share it.
Yeah, I'm glad you have, because I know there's some bishops that maybe find themselves in this space right now, and it's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And fair enough, and or maybe putting it off because the inevitable is before them, but having the energy and knowing how to navigate it can be tricky. What's your advice to them if they're looking at this and kind of
Yeah,
putting it
certainly.
off? Yeah.
It is a daunting challenge.
Mm.
um, uh, and none of us really want to enter into conflicts.
No.
um, Most of us don't want to make the decisions that are going to be painful for people to accept.
Mm.
We don't want to hurt people, and um, you know, I think so many times when we look at the reality of the challenges we face, we can be overwhelmed,
Mm.
and we can look at it from a negative perspective, right? This is the process to close churches.
Yes.
No, it's not.
Right.
This is a process to empower the church to take up the mission anew. So, if you're afraid of doing it, trust in the Lord. If you're overwhelmed by it, no, you don't do it alone.
Yeah.
Don't try to do it alone. You'd be foolish to do it by yourself. Empower people to be with you on that journey. I also would say is, a decision not to do anything is it's like watching the corpse rot, because it's going to happen anyways.
Yeah.
It's going to happen anyways. If you are not mission driven, if you are not mission focused, if you're not putting your resources into trying to do things differently for the different result
Yeah.
of making more disciples, you're simply going to be watching the demise, slow demise of a reality that is just not sustainable, and is not vibrant. I mean, I hate to admit this, but I have gone to parishes even after now making the decisions and announcing them, and as they begin to implement it, I've been in parishes where, sadly, I'm going, this is why I made the right decision.
Yes.
This is
Yeah.
why this decision needed to be made, because, and it's sad, and it hurts. But I think it would hurt more if we pretended that there wasn't something that needed to be addressed.
Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
didn't need to be changed. Um, you know, uh, as a little Episcopal humor, bishops will say to bishops when they find out that you've either started or you're in the midst of doing this and that. Many a bishop who's already gone through it
Yeah.
will make the comment that your successor will come and put flowers on your grave every day for what you have done,
Yeah.
because they will be so thankful that
That
they
they
didn't
didn't
have
have
to,
to do it.
that they didn't have to do it.
Yeah.
you know um, and that and we make a joke about that reality, but the reality is that far too many places, far too many dioceses are in that position, where if they don't do something, who's the successor who's going to come put flowers on the grave? Because there's going to be lots of graves of churches that are no longer vibrant places of worship and mission
Yeah.
oriented places. So, um, you know, uh, you, you have to gain the perspective, I think, as a bishop, that certainly every decision you make is going to have a huge impact on so many people's lives. But you have to be able to see that, avoiding problems, not dealing with, the reality of the limited resources that we have to protect, are only going to prolong a bad situation. Where if we can summon up the courage and call upon the Holy Spirit and get some people around us to support us,
Yeah.
you know, as you said, it doesn't take long for hope to take root, and things to start happening in a good way.
Amen. And when you add on top of that this desire and recognition that, hey, you know what, we need skills to lead differently in this age, and so let's invest
Right.
in ourselves, and let's call each other to a higher standard of what's possible in leadership. Let's evolve in our leadership so that we can get different results. I think, Bishop, the one of the things that breaks my heart, and I mean really breaks my heart, when we're putting off those decisions and then we're just giving good priests more and more churches, and then they very dutifully try, and it kills them.
Right.
And it's we're basically saying, it's almost as if we're saying, I don't care about you, I care about them, and or I care about the complaints and how that makes me feel, so I just need you to do what I ask you to do, even though we all know it's impossible. And I think there's so many priests that end up with PTSD of just negligence, of feeling uncared for, unseen, and
Yeah.
unheard.
Yeah.
And boy, the damage that place is, like, and then years later, you remove the burden from them. I'll tell you, there's years of healing that needs to take place in these men who have just been abandoned by the institutional church, and in ways that leave scars that are run deep, and it hurts me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that's it's another reason why I think we have to summon the courage to do what we need to do in these
Yeah,
times and through these processes that
yeah,
you know right size the diocese and that, because if we don't, I don't have enough priests as it is today,
yeah,
you know, and if I don't do the things that are going to help my priest, I tell my priest, people, to me, a strong priest is one who comes and asks me for help.
mm,
A weak priest is the one who thinks he can do it on his own. Because if he thinks he can do it on his own, he's probably going to find out that he can't, and then we're going to have a mess to clean up.
yeah,
So I'd rather you come and tell me that I'm struggling or I need help or whatever,
yeah,
so that I can try to respond as best I can to support you and encourage you and help you. But I don't have enough priests as it is, and
mm,
it's foolish to think, that I can continue to ask the guys to do so much when they need support and they
yeah,
need, they need the help that they to take care of themselves. If they
yeah.
can't take care of themselves, how are they going to take care of the parish?
Amen.
I use the mantra, I want happy, healthy, holy priests so I can have a happy, healthy, holy church.
Right.
And so we have to do those things that will give the support necessary to the priests. Again, I don't want to need to harp on it, but one letter said, all we're asking is you send us one priest 1 hour a week to say mass. That's all we need. That's all we
It's
want.
not that big a deal. What's your problem,
You
Bishop?
know, and that, and I read something like that. I think if I had the priest, I could, but
Yeah,
I'm not going to ask the guy who's already celebrating mass in
yeah,
3 other places to add one more.
yeah.
And how is he supposed to have a relationship with any of his places if he's literally walking down the aisle
Mm,
while still in his vestments, getting in the car to drive to the next place to celebrate the next mass?
yeah.
And do that 2 or 3 times
And our
on
mission
a
is way
Sunday.
bigger than going to mass. Mass is meant to be the fuel. The Eucharist is the fuel for a missionary
Mm-hmm.
disciple. Like,
Right,
are we on mission? And if we're
right.
on mission, we're going to have a lot less problems of church closures.
Yeah.
The question's going to be, how do we make a bigger church because we have limited priests, but boy, we have a whack of followers, and hopefully that will invoke more vocations, discernment
Right,
to vocations. And
right.
I'll tell you, if I was discerning the priesthood, I would want you as my bishop. I'll tell you that right now, because you really do care for your priests and you mean what you say. You're a man of your
Mhm.
word, and you're doing what's required to bring about the health and the happiness and the hope and the holiness of your priests. And I just really appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
most welcome. Thank you for this conversation. It's
Sure.
been a joy. And to all you that have been listening to this conversation, I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, just give a thumbs up by clicking the link below. That would be great. Or feel free to subscribe. I told you that there was a couple of announcements. One of them is this. I have had a conversation with Dan Cellucci, who's the CEO of CLI, Catholic Leadership Institute. And so I'll put the link below to that podcast. It was a great conversation. He and his organization have been a real blessing to Bishop Lou and many other churches in North America. And so I can't recommend them enough. They're wonderful
Mhm.
people who do great work. And then there's also a podcast that I did with Fr Adam Cesarek, who is one of Bishop Lou's priests, and we did a course together with some priests in Bishop Lou's diocese, and the podcast that he did was so good about young priests and coming of age in many ways, coming to a place of growing in wisdom and service and humility. And I'd really encourage you to listen to that too. And one final thing as we wrap up is that at Huntley Leadership, we do diocesan huddles. And so if you're a diocesan employee, you want to get together with your bishop just to have an open conversation about the things that are facing you, to see if that conversation with us will be a blessing for you. We'd be happy to do that. Just go to huntleyleadership.com and reach out to us, and we'd be more than happy to have that conversation with you, because it isn't easy being a pastor, and it's not easy being a bishop or a diocesan staff person. And we just rejoice in the ability to work with all of you as you try to break your
Mhm.
diocese and your church amazing. So God bless you all. But go ahead, Bishop.
Yeah, I just want to say, if something I said, and somebody has a question or wants further information about how our process looked like that, I'm more than happy. Just reach out to us at the Diocese of Peoria, and we'll respond as quickly as we can.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. I wanted to ask you earlier, but I didn't want to put you on the spot in the middle of a podcast. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. That is very gracious of you, and I would strongly encourage you to take Bishop Lou up on that offer, because they would be more than happy to invest in you, and I'm really glad to hear that. So again, thank you all for all the work that you do. I know this isn't easy, but it sure is worth it. God bless you, and we will see you next time. I want to encourage you, as you lead this week, be faithful to God and generous to others. See you next time, and remember, if you're still breathing, you are powered for impact.